All right, let's dive into something that really affects every single one of us, our money. We're going to take a trip back in time to unpack this incredible story about gold, the dollar, and why that cash in your wallet is a totally different beast than it was just a few decades ago. Let's get right into it. You ever get that feeling that your money just doesn't stretch as far as it used to? Yeah, you are not alone. It's a feeling people are having all over the world. I mean, in places like China, rising prices are actually pushing regular folks to buy tangible things, stuff they can actually hold, like gold, just to protect their savings. And that really gets to the heart of a huge question. What gives our money value in the first place? So, to figure out what's happening today, we've actually got to rewind the clock and look at what money originally was. For a long, long time, money wasn't just some abstract idea. It was a physical promise, a promise tied directly to gold. This whole idea was called the gold standard. And really, it was like a set of golden handcuffs for governments. They couldn't just fire up the printing presses whenever they felt like it. Nope. Every single dollar, every pound, every franc was basically a claim check for a real, physical amount of gold sitting in a vault somewhere. It meant that paper money wasn't just paper. It was a rock-solid guarantee. And the way this all started was actually super simple, almost common sense. Imagine trying to carry around a bunch of heavy, clunky gold coins. It's a pain, right? And it's risky. So people started leaving their gold with local goldsmiths they trusted for safekeeping. In return, the goldsmith would give them a little paper receipt. Well, it didn't take long for people to realize it was way easier to just trade the paper receipts than to keep going back to get the heavy metal. And just like that, banknotes were born. Not as money itself, but as a convenient stand-in for the real thing. For a long time, the British pound was the top dog, the center of this whole gold-backed world. But then, the first half of the 20th century happened. A series of massive, world-changing events completely redrew the financial map and crowned a new king, the US dollar. It all started with World War I. You see, to pay for a war, you need a lot of money. So European countries broke the golden rule. They printed tons of cash and then shipped their gold reserves over to the United States to pay for weapons and supplies. Then, bam, the Great Depression hits, shaking the entire global economy. By the time World War II was over, Europe was in ruins, but America? Its factories were booming, its shores untouched by the fighting. And here's the result of all that chaos. Think about this. By the time the dust settled from World War II, the United States was sitting on over 70% of the entire world's monetary gold. That one staggering fact is the foundation for everything that came next. Because if you have the gold, you have the power. So what do you do when you have all the gold? Well, in 1944, the world's leaders got together at a place called Bretton Woods and basically redesigned the whole system around America. The plan was pretty clever. Instead of every currency being tied to gold, they would all be tied to the US dollar. And the US dollar, in turn, was tied to gold. The dollar was now the official anchor for the entire world economy. It was the one currency you could still take to the bank and swap for a guaranteed chunk of gold. And this system, it actually worked pretty well for a few decades. It led to a lot of stability and growth. But there was a problem brewing just beneath the surface. And it all came to a head in a single moment. A single decision that changed modern finance forever. That problem had a name, the Vietnam War. It was incredibly expensive, and to pay for it, the US started printing more and more dollars, way more than it had gold in its vaults to back up. Other countries, especially France, started to notice. They got nervous. So they started showing up with shiploads of US dollars and saying, okay, we'd like our gold now, please, which was their right. And suddenly, America's gold pile started shrinking, fast. And then it happened. On a single Sunday night, August 15th, 1971, President Nixon went on TV and dropped a bombshell. He announced to the world that the United States would no longer exchange its dollars for gold. Period. Just like that, the gold window was slammed shut. And in that one moment, the world we knew was gone. The change was, well, it was everything. Before 1971, a dollar bill was essentially a coupon, a promise you could redeem for real gold. After 1971, that promise vanished. The money was no longer a claim check for something tangible. Its value now came from just one thing: our shared belief and faith in the government that issues it. We call this fiat money, money that has value simply because the government says it does. And once those golden shackles were gone, oh boy, did things change. Without that hard physical limit, money could now be created on a scale that nobody had ever even dreamed of before. We had entered the age of debt. I mean, just look at this graph. It tells the whole story. As soon as that link to gold was cut, the amount of money in circulation just exploded. It went vertical. And it wasn't just governments printing it. The banking system itself turned into this incredible engine for creating money out of thin air. So how does this work? It's a system called fractional reserve banking. It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually simple. When you deposit, say $100 in a bank, the bank only has to keep a small piece of it, maybe $10. It then loans out the other $90. That $90 gets deposited in another bank, which then keeps $9 and loans out $81, and so on and so on. Every time a loan is made, new money is literally created, multiplying that original $100 across the entire economy. And all this new money had to go somewhere. It fueled this massive, mind-boggling explosion in complex financial products. We're talking about the derivatives market, which is basically a giant global web of financial bets. By 2008, that market was estimated to be worth a staggering $600 trillion. Let that sink in. That's 10 times the entire economic output of every single country on Earth, combined. A massive pyramid, all built on this new kind of money. And if that sounds like a fragile house of cards, well, you're right. It was. And in 2008, we all watched it come crashing down. It started with banks giving out risky home loans. Then they bundled up those risky loans into these complex derivatives and sold them to investors everywhere. When people couldn't pay their mortgages, the whole thing started to unravel. The first domino fell, and it triggered a chain reaction that nearly took down the entire global financial system. And how did we fix the 2008 crisis? You guessed it, by creating even more money. And that brings us right up to today, where the system that was born back in '71 is starting to face a whole new set of challenges, and people are starting to question the dollar's undisputed reign. So what's happening right now? Well, for one, you've got major players like China quietly stacking up physical gold again. They're rebuilding the very reserves that used to back the whole system. At the same time, we're seeing this big push to trade for critical things, especially oil, using currencies other than the dollar. And all of this is happening while the constant money creation just keeps raising more and more questions about the long-term value of the dollar itself. Okay, this chart right here really puts it all into perspective. It shows what happened in the 40 years after 1971. If you had held on to a $100 bill, by 2011, inflation would have chewed its buying power all the way down to just $18. But if you had held $100 worth of gold over that same time, wow, it would have grown to be worth almost $5,000. It's a pretty dramatic picture of the difference between a currency that can be printed and a hard asset that can't. Now let's be clear, the dollar is still the king of the hill. You can see it right here. It makes up the lion's share of global reserves held by central banks. But it's not the only game in town anymore. You got the euro, the yen, and now, more and more, the Chinese yuan are all part of a much more complex, messy, multipolar currency world. The absolute dominance the dollar had after World War II, well, that's changing. So, after this wild ride through a century of financial history, from gold coins in a vault to trillions of dollars created on a keyboard, where does that leave all of us? What are we supposed to do with this information? We've seen money transform from something real and tangible into a system based on faith. We've seen how that unleashed incredible growth and innovation, for sure, but we've also seen the massive risks that came along with it. We are all living inside this grand experiment that started in 1971, trying to navigate a world that's constantly shifting under our feet. Look, this isn't just some academic history lesson. This story directly impacts your savings, your retirement, and your family's future. Which brings us to the final and honestly the most important question of all. In an era where money can be created without limit, where the global order is being challenged, and where the old promises have been broken, you really have to decide for yourself what holds true value. Thanks for watching.